A millionaire thought he had everything until the woman he thought he had forgotten walked back into his life, not as a memory, but as a teacher at his daughter's school play. Maxwell Bennett's world was built on success and power. But that night, as he walked into a school auditorium expecting the usual, his entire universe shifted. There, standing in front of him, was Claire, his ex-wife, thriving, and everything he had lost. In that instant, Maxwell froze. The past he thought he'd buried rushed back, and with it, the painful truth. No amount of wealth could ever replace the love he had abandoned. Stay with us, because what happens next is a journey of second chances, regrets, and the hope of healing a family broken by time. Maxwell Bennett stood on the balcony of his penthouse, overlooking the glittering city below. The skyline stretched out endlessly, a perfect reflection of the empire he had built, an empire of glass, steel, and power. He had everything a man could want: luxury cars, a mansion with more rooms than he could count, and enough money to never worry about the future. His name was synonymous with success. Yet, as the wind tugged at his tailored suit, something gnawed at him, a hollow, empty feeling that no amount of money could fill. He had everything, but it felt like nothing at all. His heart, once full of love and hope, had grown cold, like the city lights below that twinkled without meaning. Maxwell's life had been built on ambition. He'd climbed the ladder, stepped on whoever he needed to, and never looked back. He had made sacrifices, too many to count. But the biggest sacrifice had been Claire. She was the one who had left. Claire had been his rock, his equal, his everything. They had been in love, young, carefree, full of dreams. He remembered the way she'd smile at him across the dinner table, the quiet way she'd laugh at his jokes, the way she supported his every dream, even when it seemed impossible. But that had been years ago. The business had come first, and Claire had started to fade into the background. She had always been patient, always understanding. But there had come a point where patience turned into silence, and silence, as Maxwell had learned the hard way, was the loudest cry for help. One day, Claire had packed her bags. She hadn't even said goodbye, just left a note on the kitchen counter. It was simple. "I can't do this anymore." That was it. No fight, no argument, just an absence that swallowed everything he had once known. She had taken Lily, their daughter, and gone. And Maxwell, for the first time in his life, had truly been alone. He had convinced himself that it was for the best, that he needed to focus on his work, that the divorce was just another obstacle to overcome in the pursuit of greatness. And for a while, it had worked. He buried the pain in the pursuit of more deals, more money, more power. But it was always there, the hollow feeling that gnawed at him, the absence of her presence in his life. He hadn't even realized how deep the wound was until the night he walked into that school auditorium, only to find Claire standing on the stage, not as a ghost of his past, but a woman alive, thriving, and more beautiful than he remembered. He didn't know if he was ready for it, but he was about to find out. But fate had other plans. Maxwell had always considered himself in control, in business, in life, in everything. His ability to manage the chaos of his empire was what had made him successful, what had earned him the respect of colleagues and rivals alike. Nothing, no one, ever threw him off balance. But that night, as he entered the school auditorium, everything he thought he knew about himself was shaken to its core. He had arrived late, just as the play was about to start, his mind preoccupied with a conference call he'd just taken. His phone was still buzzing in his pocket as he made his way toward the back, where parents were gathering in quiet anticipation. Lily, his daughter, had invited him to attend, and he'd come out of a sense of obligation more than anything else. He had little to no idea what the play was about, but he hadn't wanted to disappoint her. Maxwell had barely settled into his seat when the lights dimmed, signaling the start of the performance. It was a small, intimate venue, bright yellow lights highlighting the faces of young actors nervously waiting their turn. As the curtain rose, Maxwell Bennett had always prided himself on his control. He had mastered the art of business, built an empire, and never let anything or anyone shake him. But that night, as he stepped into the small school auditorium, everything he thought he knew about himself crumbled in an instant. Lily had asked him, of course, his daughter. She had begged him to come to the play, and despite the distance between them, he couldn't say no. But as Maxwell took his seat near the back, his mind was elsewhere. The hum of a recent business deal still echoed in his head. He was just going through the motions, not fully invested. He didn't expect to be moved. Then the lights dimmed, and the curtain rose. Maxwell's eyes moved over the stage, searching for Lily. But instead, his gaze was caught by someone else. Claire. Standing at the edge of the stage, talking with the children, guiding them through the performance. His heart stopped. His breath faltered. The years that had separated them vanished in that moment, and he was back in the past, surrounded by memories that had long been buried. She wasn't just there as a parent or a visitor. She was working, directing, leading, smiling with an ease that was both familiar and foreign to him. She radiated confidence, a calm strength he had seen in her before. The woman who had once been his everything was now completely different, thriving without him, and perhaps even better for it. Maxwell's stomach twisted. The pain of their lost years hit him hard, sharper than he ever expected. He hadn't prepared for this, for her presence to be so powerful, for her to be alive, living a life he had never imagined for her. But what struck him most wasn't the shock of seeing her. It was the lack of bitterness in her eyes when their gazes met. She didn't seem angry. She didn't seem hurt. She seemed peaceful. Maxwell was frozen, caught between the past and the present, unsure of how to react or what to do next. He had spent so many years hiding from this moment, but here it was, right in front of him, unavoidable. And then, just as quickly as it had happened, Claire returned to her work with the children, her focus on them, not him. Maxwell couldn't look away. He couldn't process the emotions flooding him. This moment was everything he had tried to forget. But now, it was impossible to ignore. And that's when everything began to change. After the play ended, Maxwell found himself trapped in a whirlwind of emotions, none of them familiar. He tried to push through the crowd, but his legs felt heavy, as though something unseen was holding him in place. Claire. Her name echoed in his mind as he scanned the sea of parents and teachers, trying to locate her. He had told himself he'd simply attend the event for Lily. But now, after seeing Claire again, after feeling the force of that old connection, Maxwell couldn't leave without confronting the woman who had once meant everything to him. It wasn't long before he spotted her, standing in a quiet hallway, talking with another teacher. She looked the same, but different. The years had changed her. She no longer seemed like the woman he had walked away from, the woman who had begged him to stay. She was composed, assured, a woman who had learned to thrive on her own. Maxwell's pulse quickened as he approached. He could feel his chest tighten with each step. The words he had rehearsed for so long were gone. All that remained was a raw, aching silence between them. When Claire saw him, her eyes flickered with recognition, but she didn't flinch. No anger, no resentment, just the quiet calm of someone who had long moved on. "Maxwell," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Claire," he responded, barely able to steady his breath. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick, charged with everything they had never said. It was the kind of silence that only comes when there's so much unsaid, so much history, that words seem inadequate. Maxwell couldn't hold it in any longer. "What are you doing here?" His voice cracked, but he tried to hide it behind his usual confidence. Claire's eyebrows arched, and a small smile tugged at her lips. "I work here now, Maxwell. I'm a teacher." "I can see that," he said, his tone sharper than he intended. "But why? Why here? Why this?" He motioned vaguely to the school around them. The pain of the question slipped through despite himself. The life she had built without him seemed like a reflection of everything he had failed to see. Claire's face softened, but there was a steeliness in her eyes that Maxwell hadn't expected. "I stayed because this was where I could build a life. Maxwell." After everything that happened, this was the only way to heal. His words caught in his throat, a flash of guilt rushing through him. "You didn't need to leave me, Claire." "I could have." "No, Maxwell." She cut him off, her voice quiet but final. "You couldn't have. You were too busy with your empire to see what was right in front of you. I couldn't wait anymore. And Lily. She needed stability. She needed someone who was there." Maxwell's chest tightened. Her words felt like a slap, truths he hadn't been able to face. He had pushed her to the brink, had pushed both of them away, all in the name of success. And now, standing before him, Claire wasn't just a ghost from his past. She was a woman who had survived, who had thrived. He opened his mouth to speak again, but no words came. The weight of her disappointment was more than he could carry. Claire's gaze softened just slightly, but her next words hit him, like a punch. "I didn't leave you because I wanted to. I left because I had to." Maxwell's heart shattered at the finality in her voice, but the biggest revelation was still to come. Maxwell stood there, stunned, the weight of Claire's words sinking in like a heavy stone. The silence between them deepened, and he felt it in every part of his being. There had been so many years of avoiding this, running from the truth of their relationship, from the mistakes he'd made. And now, with Claire standing in front of him, the truth was unavoidable. But there was more. "I didn't leave you because I wanted to." Claire's voice echoed again in his mind. "I left because I had to." She paused, her gaze hardening for a brief moment. "And you never even noticed?" Maxwell swallowed, his throat dry. What do you mean?" Claire's expression hardened, her eyes turning cold. "You weren't there when Lily needed you most," she said, her voice steady, but filled with pain. "I had to make decisions for both of us. I couldn't wait for you to wake up. She needed me to be strong, and you were never around to help." Maxwell's heart sank, his mind racing to process her words. He'd always known he wasn't the perfect father, but hearing Claire's confession, the truth of how deep his absence had cut, was something he hadn't prepared for. Claire's gaze softened for a moment as she continued, her voice quieter now, tinged with regret. "Lily had trouble after you left. She was lost, Maxwell. She needed stability, something I couldn't provide alone. I couldn't let her grow up in a broken home where her father was a stranger. I had to protect her from that." Maxwell stood frozen, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He'd missed so much, and the reality of what Claire had carried alone, the burden she'd borne, hit him like a ton of bricks. He'd failed them both. Maxwell's heart dropped. He had been so focused on building his career, on chasing something that didn't matter, that he had missed it all. Lily's struggles, Claire's sacrifices. He had never even considered how much she had carried alone. But then Claire's next words hit him like a thunderclap. "There's something else I should have told you," she said, her eyes darkening. "Lily's not the only one who needed me. I was raising another child. Our son." Maxwell froze, his blood running cold. "What? Son?" Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. "You weren't there, Maxwell. You don't even know what it's like to be a parent, a real parent. When I left, I wasn't just protecting Lily, I was protecting our son. A son you never knew about." Maxwell staggered back, his mind reeling. Another child? A son? He had been so lost in his own world, so consumed by his work, that he had missed this, a family he didn't even know existed. The shock, the anger, the guilt, they all surged within him, crashing over him like a wave. He had never thought of Claire's sacrifices, never once considered what she had endured for their family. And that was when he realized what truly mattered. Maxwell didn't sleep that night. Every moment from the conversation with Claire replayed in his mind, her words, her quiet strength, the way he had failed her and their children. The shock of learning about their son, a child he had never known existed, twisted inside him. He had missed years of his child's life, all because he had been too wrapped up in his own pursuits. The next morning, he sat at his desk, papers scattered across the room, but he couldn't focus. Every number, every deal, every email felt like background noise to the storm inside him. It had always been business first. His empire had been the center of his world. But now, everything felt hollow. Maxwell knew he had to make things right. He couldn't undo the past, but he could start showing up. For Lily. For Claire. And for the son he didn't even know he had. He made the call to Lily's school, arranging to meet with Claire. He had no idea how to approach her, how to begin rebuilding what had been shattered. But he couldn't stand by any longer. When he saw her again, standing at the front of the school, her hands folding papers for an upcoming event, he felt the knot in his chest tighten. She didn't look at him with anger or resentment. She simply looked at him as a mother, as someone who had learned to live without him. Maxwell took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Claire," he said, his voice thick. She looked up, her expression guarded. "Maxwell," she replied, her tone calm. "What is it?" "I want to make things right," he said, the words almost foreign in his mouth. "I've made mistakes, and I know it's going to take time, but I want to be a father. I want to be there for you, for our family." Claire didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied him with a quiet intensity, weighing his words. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she nodded slowly. "Maxwell," she said softly, "you can't just say you want to be a father. You have to show up. You have to put in the work. I've been doing this on my own for years." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle deep within him. "I know," he said, "and I will. I'm not asking for anything more than a chance to prove it." The next few weeks were filled with small, awkward steps forward. Maxwell started showing up at school events, attending parent-teacher conferences, and taking time off work to be there for Lily. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, of guilt, and of missteps. He fumbled through conversations with Claire, trying to bridge the gap between them, trying to undo years of distance. But the more time he spent with them, the more he realized how much he had missed. He started to learn the small things, how Lily liked her cereal in the morning, how she had a habit of biting her lip when she was nervous, how she loved to draw but hated to show anyone her art. He started to understand the deep bond between Claire and Lily, and the way their family had found a rhythm without him. It wasn't always easy. Some nights, Maxwell lay awake, wondering if he was even capable of making up for the years he had missed. He had to change, had to unlearn everything he had used as an excuse for his absence. But the hardest test was still ahead. It happened during the annual school play. Maxwell had shown up as he always did, trying to be present for Lily. He had spent weeks rebuilding his connection with her, slowly but surely. But nothing had prepared him for what he was about to witness. The play had ended, the audience clapping, parents buzzing with excitement. Maxwell, standing near the exit, was waiting for Lily when he saw Claire across the room, holding their son in her arms, his son. The boy looked at him with wide eyes, unsure. Claire caught Maxwell's gaze, and for a split second, they both froze. Then, in a quiet but firm voice, Claire called out to him, "Maxwell, come here. It's time you meet him." Maxwell's heart skipped. He walked toward her, every step heavy, unsure of what to say. Claire's son, his son, stood there, clutching her hand. Maxwell knelt down to his level, forcing a smile. "Hey there," he said softly. The boy didn't respond right away. He just stared at Maxwell, his eyes wide. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the boy said, "Your son?" Claire's face softened, and Maxwell's chest tightened. In that moment, he realized how much he had missed, how much he had hurt. "I didn't know," Maxwell whispered, his voice breaking. "But I'm here now. I'm so sorry." Tears welled up in Claire's eyes as she stepped forward, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "It's not just about being sorry, Maxwell. You need to be here. For him. For both of them." Maxwell nodded, his heart shattering as he realized the enormity of what he had to do. Nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed that emotional confrontation were not without their challenges, but something had shifted within Maxwell, something deep and unshakable. He had been given a second chance, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. Maxwell began spending more time with Lily and Claire, slowly but surely, rebuilding the foundation they had lost. His first visit to their home was awkward, filled with the weight of years spent apart. But there was something else there, too. Something new. Something warm. Lily was hesitant at first, unsure of how to reconcile the father who had been absent for so long. But as they spent more time together, Maxwell began to see the small changes, the way she would smile when he entered a room, the way she leaned into his touch when he brushed her hair back. It was slow, but it was progress. Claire, too, seemed to soften. She still had her walls, but there was a sense of cautious hope in her eyes. Maxwell knew he couldn't erase the past, but he was starting to understand how to make things right, one moment at a time. One Sunday afternoon, the three of them sat together in the living room, watching Lily draw pictures on the coffee table. It wasn't anything grand or spectacular, but it was a moment of peace, of connection. For the first time in years, Maxwell felt like part of their world again, not as a visitor or a stranger, but as a father, as a partner. Claire looked at him, her eyes soft. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice filled with unspoken gratitude. Maxwell took her hand in his heart full. "No, thank you. For giving me this chance. It wasn't perfect." They still had a long road ahead of them. But in that moment, with Lily's laughter filling the room, Maxwell knew that the love they had once lost was starting to find its way back. Second chances weren't easy, but they were worth fighting for. And as he held Claire's hand, he realized that this was what truly mattered. Love, family, second chances.